Welcome to the Liberty Watchdog Network, a highly enlightening show that discusses America's founding principles and how they still apply today. Learn what our government was intended to be, how it has gotten out of control, and what you can do about it. The Constitution is in crisis. If you are a concerned American about the direction of this country, then you are not alone and must tune in every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can't defend what you don't know. Learn it or lose it. Please be sober-minded that what we are about to share will be shocking to you. I am your Son of the American Revolution host and LibertyWatchdog.com founder, Nate Green. So let's explore our nation's founding principles of liberty. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is December 20th, 2017. For those of you that are unaware of what the past several years since 2014, of what's been going on in Nevada with the Bundy family and the Hammond family in Oregon, then you need to do some research and learn what really happened during those times. To this day, Cliven Bundy is still in jail. The government, in a nutshell, tried to confiscate this man's property under the guise of the Bureau of Land Management, tied to Harry Reid and the Clinton family, and also the Walton family that owns Walmart were part of this. These individuals, their goal was to strike a deal with a Chinese corporation for building a solar farm. And though the Bundy family had possession or control of this land for over 100 years, the BLM started imposing huge fees against the family, exorbitant fees, to get them to comply by giving away this property, which they had claim to. Second of all, the Hammond family, who are still also in jail, unconstitutionally, by the way, because of double jeopardy. The Bundy family and other ranchers across America, Lavoy Finicum, who was murdered, assassinated by your own government, went to defend this family. Now, the troubling part about this is that the Bundys and those that were at the Malheur National Forest have been released, but are still dealing with absolute kangaroo court and injustice due to a corrupt legal system, that the even prosecution is so corrupt that they are keeping information, withholding documentation to the grand jury. And this, my friends, is just an example of where we are today. No different than the state of our founding fathers and our colonists during the time of the Crown. In fact, I'd say it's even worse. So you need to be aware of what's going on. Get your head out of the sand. Because if you're a rancher or you're a farmer, and if this was you, what would you do? Would you stand up against tyranny and get educated to the law of our land and God's natural law and understand the true meaning of the Constitution, and that there are 4 branches of government? And people say, oh no, there's only 3. Well, I challenge you to understand that what is the 4th most important branch of all? And that branch is the first 3 words of the preamble of the Constitution. It's we, the people. So, in a nutshell, if you're not educated, if you're not well-read on where we are today and where we came from, then you can't defend what you don't know. And that's how tyranny and evil people take control. You know, Christ actually called us to be discerning, like the Bereans in Acts 17. To question the spirits, put them to the test. And that's the only way you're going to maintain the liberty that was actually shed and bled and died for. And if you want to possess your freedom, to perpetuate it to your posterity, then it's vital for you to get educated. Sadly, many Americans are unaware that the Bureau of Land Management, this unconstitutional agency among the 2,700 unconstitutional agencies, have their own trained snipers. And these snipers had their lasers and their crosshairs pointed at the Bundy family. And there's footage of this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not making this up. You can go on YouTube and you can see actual film recorded of what transpired back in 2014 at the Bundy Ranch. So the first time since Lexington did you have people, average Americans, decide this is enough, that went to the Bundy's aid to help the family. Not since the 1700s has anything happened like this to this degree on American soil. But did you see the media pick it up? Did you see this talked about in classrooms, in churches? It's been ignored. And that's a wake-up call to what Christ warned us, that Satan is the ruler of this world. But it's up to you and me to get this truth out there, to share with your friends, family, neighbors. Because just because it's not talked about doesn't mean it's not happening. And again, until it happens to you, people tend not to care. And I use an analogy with students that, well, it's happening over there. It doesn't affect me. My analogy is that t-shirt and it has a hole in it. And you keep wearing it and washing it, wearing it and washing it. What happens to that hole? That hole grows. So what started out as a tiny little tear in the fabric, next thing you know, it unravels and the whole entire shirt is affected. And that's where we are today, folks, is the fabric is unraveling. And it's up to you and me to do something about it. And the first thing you must do is educate your mind to the principles of liberty. One man that did get educated about this sadly gave his life. His name was Lavoy Finicum, who was assassinated by black ops agents. No one really knows whether they were FBI, BLM, or trained assassins. But this man was assassinated because of the Malheur National Forest standoff. And it really wasn't a standoff. It was just a representation of citizens standing against a tyrannical government that was taking land rights away that were completely unconstitutional. And they made a stand. They had a constitutional right to make a stand. And we as a people forget that the government came from the people, not the people came from the government. It's not that way. It was originally designed that, as I mentioned before, the four branches. What's the most important branch? The most important branch that forged government. And again, remember, it's the first three words of the preamble, we the people. You are the most important branch. The government won't tell you that. The people that we've employed to uphold and defend our God-given liberties will not tell you that, because they don't even know. It's been lost, it's been forgotten, purposely so. And it's part of an agenda, and it's not a conspiracy, to withhold our actual heritage, our actual past that my ancestors lived. They breathed, they died, for the sake of you and me to be able to discuss things right now. The question I have is, Donald Trump knew about what was happening in Malheur National Forest. He was one of the few that spoke about it at the time. Now as president, he does have the authority to pardon Cliven Bundy, his family, and those that have been held unjust with these bogus charges that have been brought up by an agency that does not answer to the people. And that leads me to the next part of what I want to talk about today. And yes, we're in that time of Christmas, happy times and wonderful things, but folks, let's not deviate from the pain and suffering and the terrible situation that people are still dealing with in regards to tyranny within their own government, within their own unconstitutional acts that are being perpetrated against them. Part of the 101 constitutional questions that we teach with the Constitutional Boot Camp, freedomspirit.com, libertywatchdog.com, is based on over 40 years of constitutional research and over 15,000 hours of study on legislative usurpations. One of the questions I want to share is, does the Constitution give the president power to regulate or bail out industries, or to commit troops to war, to give foreign aid, to make laws by executive orders, to decide who gets federal aid and who does not, to chisel away at American sovereignty by making executive agreements with foreign corporations, or to lock up the natural resources of the nation from being enjoyed by the people? And simply the answer is, constitutionally, in Article 2, there is no constitutional authority for the president to do any of the above. And I want you to note that thus why the agencies, and by the way, there's like nearly 2,700 plus agencies. That's right, 2,700. You have, like, for example, the BLM, the FDA, the EPA, the DOE, the NOAA, NOAA, USDA, DOC, FCC, ATF, and the list goes on. And mind you, they operate in an unconstitutional zone. And you ask why? Because they only answer directly to the president, completely bypassing the limited delegated powers provided by the Constitution, what Jefferson referred to as the chains of the Constitution, and giving the president executive branch a usurping private army of executive employees, many who will ignore their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution even from themselves. Folks, that's why Ben Franklin made the statement back in 1755 that those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. I want you to think about that. If you're willing to give up something in thought that someone else is there to defend and provide for your family and uphold your liberty, then you are gravely mistaken. So the injustice that's about and rampant across America, and as I just mentioned, the Clive and Bundy family and the Hammond family, and the other unconstitutional Russian tie to the Clinton family that is not brought up by the media, which is clear, and you can research it for yourself, is their ties to a Russian corporation, I believe the name was Russia One, to hand over uranium rights to the property and the land that the Hammond family in Oregon own. So where's the investigation into the Clinton family and the Reid family and those politicians that are tied to this, the Pelosi and whatnot? And it's not about party, folks. This is about greed. This is about selfish greed and agenda. These people that are your non-representing representatives care nothing about you. It's all about their own privy, their own stature in life. And so we're seeing more of this happen throughout time, the loss of virtue, the loss of morality. So it's important to get educated. Educated to what, you might say? Well, we forget, folks, that you don't learn how to walk the minute you are born. First, you must learn how to crawl, stand, and then walk. And it's a process. And yet we're so willing to learn a process of our job that's critical for us to make money so we can pay our bills. But what about the process of liberty? The process of freedom that gives you the liberty to work your job, to drive your car, to do things that you perceive to be free. Well, that also is part of the same education as it is to learn how to walk. And it needs to be looked at, and it needs to be followed, and it needs to be learned. So last time we talked, our last show, we went over the first three of our 101 constitutional questions. Principles of liberty, if you will. If you recall, number one was, under the Constitution, who has the sovereign authority to govern? Was our first question. I want you to go back to the last show, and you can play it and listen to it and go over it several times, share it with friends. In what way are all men all created equal? And what is an inalienable right? So today we're going to cover questions 4, 5, and 6. And so for question 4, which inalienable rights were listed in the Declaration of Independence? Which inalienable rights? And folks, if you ask this of a person seeking power, a person seeking to be a representative, I guarantee you they're not going to be able to answer that question. And it's vital to understand this because the Declaration of Independence is equal part, synonymous with the law of this land. You have God's natural law. You have the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and you have the Constitution of the United States. Those are referred to as what we call the de jure Constitution, the original. So which inalienable rights were listed in the Declaration of Independence? The Declaration of Independence lists the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's right, those are God-given rights. And so number 5, what did the founders mean by the pursuit of happiness? And this is a collective phrase designed to cover all of the other inalienable rights that we are endowed by our Creator. Notice I said Creator, not endowed by man. And we're really at a time where the state wants to become our God, and that's part of the communist, democratic party way. And there's planks of communism, folks. And there's more than just 10 planks of what Karl Marx wrote. And if you go and look at all these 10 planks, you can find out that they're all fulfilled now and have been for a very long time. So number 6, give an example of an inalienable right which is essential to the pursuit of happiness. You see, the founders believed, for example, that human happiness requires that each of us enjoy the right to acquire, develop, and dispose of property. They believe that without protection of property rights, all other rights are placed in serious jeopardy. Did you hear what I just said? They believe that without protection of property rights, all other rights are placed in serious jeopardy. So the right to property was sacred to the colonists. The right for you to be able to control, own, dispose of your property without government coming into play and taking control of your property has completely been usurped to where we are today. Totally usurping. And property was not to be taxed. And if you go back and read the documents of the Founding Fathers, property, again, was sacred. There was to be no taxation without representation. You weren't to have a government come in and try to take control of your property for turtles, or for a solar farm, or for uranium rights. It was not part of the constitutional clause to guarantee our God-given liberties. And so many are unaware that one of the first socialist, at the time they were progressive, is just a more palatable word, if you will, for communism, was Teddy Roosevelt, that started to take over huge tracts of lands unconstitutionally, mind you. And if you read your Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 is clear. There's only 4 reasons that the federal government can take over any state land or property. And what are those 4 reasons? Well, it's spelled out for you. The erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and that's it. Period. If you want to have a forestry, well, then the state has the right to do so, because each state is sovereign. Each state is a sovereign government, if you will, within our government, folks. You have 50 United States, and that's why you all have a state constitution, as was designed. So it's important to know these things. because liberty depends on it. And otherwise, you could be the next Bundy family. You could be the next Hammond family. And sadly, folks, until it happens to you personally and individually, nobody seems to care. And that's just sad. So in closing, ladies and gentlemen, for as we approach this new year, let us remember that the past year is still not completed until you get educated. And pray for these families that are in harm's way of tyranny. We at the Constitutional Boot Camp, Liberty Watchdog Network, Freedom Spirit Ministry, wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas, and let us remember the reason for the season. It's not about Santa Claus. It's about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and his birth. On that note, God bless, and may God bless you, and may God bless America.